In this section, we're going to talk about emancipation, where her life went when she started this journey, really knowing that the parents were so willing to just let her go. And she also is going to talk about God revealing himself to her and how she was following his voice from a young age. So this is the part where we take, it's a long story, but what we're doing is we're showing where God intervenes and how even though she went through these horrific situations, he was always with her. So go ahead and talk about the emancipation.
Well, the whole emancipation process, I didn't know how it all happened, but in the past couple of years I was actually talking to my mom, and she says that my dad or my stepmom had approached her and said that this is something that I had requested. Now, you have to understand that the manipulation is still going on behind the scenes, even though I have no idea what's going on, because I didn't even know what the word emancipation was or meant or anything. I just knew one day I was showing up at a courthouse and there was all these adults sitting there in front of me saying, we're going to do this. And they signed the papers. The lawyer explained to me what this meant, and that in order to be emancipated, you have to be able to support yourself. And in supporting yourself, that means you have to have a job. You have to, have an income and a place to live. And
how old were you?
I was 17.
17. Okay.
Yeah.
And you were living with who at this time?
I was living with, of all people, my boyfriend's grandmother.
Your boyfriend's grandmother. Okay.
Okay. And she had agreed to allow me to stay there. I had to pay for my food and the same thing you would if you were having an apartment or something. But she allowed me to stay there, and she was there at the emancipation process. And so my father signed the papers, my mom signed the papers, I signed the papers, and for many, many years I kept that legal document to prove to myself that my parents did not love me. That was like the only thing that made sense in my life.
But this is why they did all these horrible things.
Right.
Because they didn't love me, and now I know that.
Right, because now they signed the papers that said they really didn't want me to begin with, And so...
So did that somehow bring you comfort or more pain?
It gave me assurance that what I had lived there was a reason for it. Because nothing made sense. Why I had to deal with all that junk if there really was no reason. I mean, in your mind, you have to make sense
something,
of,
right?
There's got to be a reason, and there really wasn't. But now I had a reason, and I had just asked my mom, because her and I do have, it's like a distant relationship, but we do now talk.
More like a relative.
Yeah.
It's not like a mother-daughter relationship.
No. Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to describe it. And I asked her about that day, and she's like, oh, yeah, I still have that document. And I was surprised because, in my healing process, I had to let that go. And it wasn't important to me anymore, but she still had the document to prove that. I was like, that's kind of an eerie feeling.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyways, I was emancipated, and through the rest of my high school time, it was very interesting because I would go to school during the day, and then in the evenings, as soon as school was over, I would go to work. I would work till 11 o'clock, and then I would go back to my home and go to bed, and then get up the next morning and do it all over again.
Was your boyfriend living there at the time as well?
No.
He was with his parents?
Yeah.
And you were with the grandmother, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, through her taking me in and giving me a place to stay, I learned even with the prior foster family that I had talked about, that was kind of the beginning of what real love and family was supposed to be like. But through my boyfriend's grandmother, she accepted me. She didn't have to. But she opened her arms, she opened her house, and she willingly gave me a place to stay. She accepted me for who I was and where I was in my life. She didn't ask questions. She just knew that here was a young girl who had no place to go,
right.
And so
She was another defining moment in your life.
She really was, and again, my children grew up calling her grandma.
Oh, that's wonderful.
You know, like they didn't understand that they weren't really related.
The dynamics.
Yeah, and so I just love the fact that the people who made the biggest impact in my life were accepted by my children as their grandparents, you know. And so that
your children also have a relationship with that foster family that kept you and took you on vacation.
Oh yeah, I love my son. This is a great story. They were at my house one day celebrating my birthday, I think it was, or I'm not quite sure. Maybe it was my birthday, but anyways. So my son said to him, the father, he's like, "Do you mind me going, Grandpa?" And he says, he's like, "No, as long as you call me." Oh, this is so funny, and I'm going to blow it. As long as you call me Stud Muffin Pat. And we just cracked up. It's like, that's great. Stud Muffin Pat. So that is just like one of those crazy moments, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so my children have just always thought of them as their grandparents. Yeah.
That's great. So these people that were defining moments in your life. So you're living with the grandmother now at this time. And she's showing you love, unconditional love, accepting you where you're at.
Yeah.
And that's what we're called to do.
Yeah.
We're called to show that love, and, you know, thank God she stepped out and did that.
Right.
So go ahead. You were working, you know, and going to school.
Yeah, I was going to school, and in the process of me working, I met this young man who was going to a local college, and he was also involved with a performance program. And he introduced me to some other people, and I got involved with doing, I totally forget what it was called, CEF, the Good News Club. And so I started working with, like, I wasn't actually the leader of the Good News Club, but I started working with a woman who led them, and so I was her helper and stuff, and I started actually taking courses on studying the Bible and at a local church and everything. And
so all these years you were going to church.
I was. That was my security.
Where did that root from?
Yeah, that, believe it or not, through all the garbage, when my father got out of prison, he started taking us to church because of my uncle. My uncle introduced him to a church, and he started taking us. And while we were at church, we were a normal family. Mm. But when we went home from church, it was a different life, you know. But one evening at church,
how old were you?
I was 9 years old. And one evening at church, they gave an invitation to come forward and accept Jesus as my Savior. And I stood there in fear. Like, I so wanted to accept Him. I so wanted this Jesus that they were talking about. I so wanted to feel that love in my heart. And I'm sitting there in fear of asking my father if it's okay to go forward. Mm. But I got up enough courage, and I asked him, and he said yes.
Wow.
And
that's
so
the grace of God.
It is. And so I didn't even hesitate. I just scooted out that pew, walked up that aisle, and I knelt down at the altar, and this woman came up to me, and she asked me if I was like, could pray with me. And I said, sure. And so she took me off in the room, and we had the conversation, and I accepted Jesus right there. And I just remember feeling brand new, feeling like alive in a different way, like in a way that no one could even hurt me. Like, even though I was being hurt physically, mm-hmm. like they couldn't hurt my spirit. They mm-hmm. couldn't hurt my soul, you know. And I had this Jesus
that they were talking about. It's
right,
amazing.
Right. And so He was a part of my life from that moment on. Even though, like, there was all this turmoil and junk going on, like, I knew with Him by my side that I could get through. Mm-hmm. And so going back to, you know, becoming part of the
Good News Clubs
mm-hmm. and stuff like that, and studying the Bible, this gentleman, well, I know you had asked about this one thing. During the time I lived in this home, I started having these dreams. Now, like...
Jesus speaks through dreams.
Yeah.
We know this from previous videos, yeah.
And so I had these occurrences, you know, prior to this, where I felt God had spoken to me, and He assured me through different things that had happened in different situations in my life, and they all came true, you know. And one of them actually happened in the detention center, where there was a situation that I was being blamed for something that I didn't do. But because I was at the wrong place at the wrong time, I was supposedly the person who did it. And the crazy thing, you know, God is a crazy God, but I love it because He's so crazy. I just love the fact that He's so crazy because it just fits into who I am.
It seems crazy to us because we can't comprehend all that He is, but He is every little thing.
Right.
He's everything.
So this situation, there was some money taken. And I happened to be in that vicinity at the time that it was supposed to be taken. But I didn't take it. And I had no idea who had, except for the fact that I was being blamed. And so I just prayed to God. I was like, please, whoever did this, could you please bring them forth so that, you know, I don't get into trouble for doing this. And as I'm laying there praying, God shows me who took it. And He showed me where it was.
Wow.
And I went back to the lady who had accused me, and I said, look, I can't tell you how this happened or, you know, how it got there, but if you look above so-and-so's bed in the drop ceiling, you will find what you're looking for. And they did. They found the money in the drop ceiling right above her bed. And, you know, I was cleared because somehow the money wasn't actually there, but airplane tickets were. And, you know, because, like, this was after the fact, of course, like, it had happened and stuff, so it was crazy. And then they found out the whole story about how they had taken the money and got it to somebody on the outside, and they got airplane tickets. And, like,
And you would have never known any of that.
No idea how that all works. But, you know, it's only through God showing me that.
Right.
And so coming forward again, I started having these dreams. And
when you were living with your boyfriend's grandmother.
Yeah. Imagine that. Because these dreams were about a different guy. And it was the same exact dream every single night for 3 nights in a row. And to the point where I went to work and I was asking everybody I knew, do you know who this guy is?
Well, tell me the dream.
Well, it was just like a gathering place. It wasn't a long dream, but there was a gathering place, and there was a bunch of different people there, and there was this guy, and, well, I won't tell you his name, but,
okay.
anyways, this gentleman had a name, and in the dream, like, I was introduced to him, and pretty much that was it. I mean, there wasn't a lot.
Just that you were introduced to him, and this is his name.
Right.
There was a specific name.
Right. And so I had the same dream 3 nights in a row, and it was driving me crazy. So I asked everybody, and nobody seemed to know who this guy was. And so I finally just let it drop. I'm like, okay, I have no idea. Like, it's just so bizarre. But through the whole process of meeting this other gentleman who was involved with the production program locally and stuff, you know, he introduced me to go into college. He suggested that maybe that would be a good step for me to go to a Christian college and get my life back on track. Because I'm going to back up a little bit here.
Okay.
Because what had happened prior to this was that I had been arrested for shoplifting at a local department store. And when that happened, the gentleman who arrested me asked me my name. And when I told him my name, he said to me, "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree." And I asked him what he meant by that, and he said, "Well, I arrested your father." And so, immediately, it was one of those defining moments where I knew I did not want to be like my father.
Mm-hmm.
I did not want to be in any of the same categories he was in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew I had to do something to change my life.
Mm-hmm.
So when this young gentleman was introducing me to a Christian college, I thought that would be a good avenue for me to
not be anything like my father.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did. I went to this Christian college, and it was a little place, you know, quaint and everything, but it very quickly reminded me of the detention center, or the whatever you want to call it. I called it a detention center. I called it prison, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my mind, I couldn't separate the two. And so I ended up dropping out of college. And so what do you have to do when you drop out of college and you're of age and there's no more school? You have to get a job.
Right.
So I got a job. And in getting a job, I met this woman, and her and I became really quickly friends. And then she introduced me to her children, and we got along great, and we used to go out and do things together and stuff. And so one day, I wanted to go roller skating. And so I was supposed to go. We had made these plans. I was supposed to go with her kids. And then all of a sudden, at the last minute, they both dropped out and said they didn't want to go. So I gotta be careful with the names here. But anyways, the mother, this woman I worked with, said to me, well, let me call my nephew and see if we can, you know, if he'll be willing to go with you and stuff. So here I am. It's really hilarious, because here I am talking to this complete stranger.
Mm-hmm. Her nephew.
Yeah, her nephew. Yeah. I'm talking to this complete stranger, trying to convince him that this girl who still has a boyfriend wants to take, you know, he wants to take me roller skating, somebody who's never met.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a crazy scenario.
Yeah.
But
you wanted to go roller skating. That's all you knew.
Exactly.
I'm going to get him to take me.
So, long story short, I finally did convince him that he wanted to do this, and so later that night he came and he picked me up, and we did. We went roller skating. And at this time, I only knew him by his first name, you know, and so that was fine. And as we were roller skating, you know, we talk, and he tells me, and he gives me his full name. And immediately the light bulb went off, and I'm standing there looking at the sky, realizing that this is the guy that I had been dreaming about 6 months prior. And I just, like, lost it. I'm like, now what do I do?
What does this mean?
It's like, here he is, face to face, you know. And I couldn't say anything to him because he had no clue.
You want to freak him out?
I had no idea. So, you know, and, you know, fast forward that story, we have now been married for almost 30 years.
Oh, my gosh.
Like, you know, we met, it was actually 2 days before Christmas we met, and we got married, like, 7 months later.
Wow.
Yeah.
When did you tell him that God showed him to you?
Sometime during the dating process.
By the way,
yeah,
God gave me a little heads up that we were going to meet.
And
God is
so accepting me.
She's nuts, but I love her.
Yeah, go figure.
But God is so good.
Yes,
He is so good.
Yes.
So you went through this terrible period in your life, endured more than anybody should have to.
Sure.
But yet, here you are. You were working towards a Christian lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
You are following God's voice.
Yes.
You marry who He has ordained for you to marry. Wow.
Yeah.
Is God good?
Yeah.
He was with you all along.
He was.
And
Absolutely.
that's amazing to me.
Yeah.
Not that I don't know this, but He blows my mind at how absolutely wonderful He is.
Yep, I agree. 100%.
And I'm blown away by how absolutely wonderful you are.
Thanks.
I know you don't think that, but I do.
Thank you.
So anyway, what next?
Well, what next? We got married.
How old were you?
21.
Mm-hmm.
I was 21, and we got married. And, you know, it didn't start out bad, you know, but through the couple first years, there were times of, you know, instability, insecurity, just because we started having children. And in children, what happens is, not that I knew this, but now that I have gone through some counseling and healing, what I've learned is when our children become the age of things that have happened to us, it can set off a trigger. And so this is what started happening, and I didn't understand it. But I finally got involved with a decent counselor, and she helped me to see that. And so I was having these emotional breakdowns and like not trying to realize what was going on, and you know, I couldn't figure out heads or tails and stuff like this. And so it was very slow starting out, to the point where I'm going to fast forward to like 5 years into our marriage. What happened was I totally fell apart. When I came to the realization that my mother had abandoned me. And now I'm going to cry.
That's okay.
Because here I have my children, and I cannot figure out for the life of me how my mother could just leave her children and not want them. Like, I just could not understand. And this is when I went to started the healing process. And I was hospitalized. I put myself into a hospital because I wanted help.
Right.
Prior to going in, I set up care for my children. I made sure everything was taken care of. I paid all the bills.
So up until this point, you had never dealt with any of this. You were just in survival mode.
Right. I was just going life that is as it is.
And now you're 5 years into your marriage. You have small children, and you're like, the triggers made you realize that you needed to heal.
Right.
Okay.
And so I went to this hospital, and I was there for, 20-some days. I don't know. I can't really remember. But I was in so much pain to the point where I was almost crippled. And the doctors were talking about getting me a special bed because, I couldn't really walk. I was, hunched over, and so that, they put a brace on me, and they wanted to get me a special bed so I wouldn't get bed sores and all this other stuff.
What was causing that? Just,
Believe it or not, I honestly, and if people tell you that stress and anxiety and stuff do not cause pain in your body, I'll tell you that they're lying.
Right.
Because I believe it was from the depression, from the anxiety, from the fear, from all the junk that I had subdued or endured, I guess that's the word I'm looking for, through my life, that it just took over my body. Because, I don't know if it's in the book, but it is in the book. One morning, I woke up.
She's writing a book, by the way.
Yeah. One morning, I woke up sobbing, laying in my bed, and I was just literally sobbing. And as I lay there, I laid in this fetal position. I was all crunched up. And the doctors walked in. And I wasn't mentally there in a sense, but I could hear them speaking, asking, what are we going to do with her?
Right.
And by this time, my bed was literally drenched from sobbing. And I couldn't stop. No matter what I did, I could not stop. But as the doctors walked out of the room, I just remember the Holy Spirit showing up in such an enormous way. If you can even imagine, just His presence filling the room, and then He's picking me up and cradling me in His arms. And it just reminds me of Isaiah 49 in verses 15 and 16, where it talks about, can a mother forget the child at her breast? But guess what? She can. But I will not forget you, because I have inscribed you on the palms of my hands. He loves us that much. He holds us in the palms of His hands. And at that very moment, I was in, I'm going to suicide. I was in His hands. But I I realized how big God really is, because the next thing I saw was He was holding the entire world. I mean, He is, when you and I talk about how big God is, I know how big God is. Like,
it's Him holding the world. Did you see it? Was it in a vision?
Yeah, it was all happening.
It was all happening around you.
Yeah. And after this all happened, and like I had that assurance that I was okay, like God was there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's totally unexplainable, but that's how God works. Because
He's crazy. And we love it.
Yeah, because He left the room, you know, like His presence was with me, but
He left the room.
He left the room. The doctors came back in. I sat up on my bed, and the next thing I know, I was walking out that door with no pain in my body.
Wow.
Like, and in my medical chart, all it says, I love it because I got to read them, it says she had a healing experience. Yeah, I guess that's a good way to explain it.
They were probably like, we don't understand what's happening here.
But there was no more pain. I walked out of my room in no pain.
Oh.
It was gone completely. And so, like, I know my God can heal people.
Mm.
But He doesn't just heal us physically.
He heals us mentally.
He heals us mentally, physically, emotionally, like the whole works. And so that was the beginning of my healing.
Mm.
And
He took that reason that you were there, that being abandoned by your mother, that was the thing you were going to deal with at that moment.
Right.
And He gave that verse, and He came and He delivered. He delivered you.
Mhm. He did. And that was the time where, during the healing process I spoke about earlier, where I had to call her
And ask her.
You know, and so I won't forget those words, but the experience I had with the presence of God in my room means more to me than her words. You know, it's just, there's no comparison.
We're so much more than that. There is so much more than this life.
Yeah.
Although it can be traumatic and we have to live it, and we have to run the race, there's a whole nother layer.
Yeah.
And you got to start, well, you're experiencing that now.
I know. It's great stuff.
It is great stuff.
Okay, now I'm going to get lost.
Okay.
So, from there, it's just a gradual process of healing.
Mm-hmm.
But probably, and I'm going to say, you know, we did mention the fact that I'm writing a book, and in the introduction of my book, I write, you know, there's some people who need to know everything. There's some people who emotionally can't handle it, so they block it out of their minds and stuff. There's all different ways of healing or dealing with the healing.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes God allows us to block those things out of our minds because we can't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to tell you assure you that, like, He gives us what we can handle. Mm-hmm. And because there's so much that has happened in my life, you know, you hear about those instantaneous healings, and I'm going to tell you, they happen. I'm not going to deny that, but there's also those ones that last for many, many years, and I'm one of those. And I'm okay with that, because of the fact that if God would have said, okay, you need to deal with all this junk at one time and get...
That would have been too much.
I would have been in the loony bin, you know, like I would not have been able to handle, and He knows that.
Mm-hmm.
So He allowed me to heal bits and pieces at a time throughout the years.
Mm-hmm.
And my children and my husband walked with me through that whole healing process and experienced it with me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so they know what it's like, so that they can interact with people on a regular basis and understand. And so they're always referring people to me. Like, oh, my mom did that.
Okay, let's stop there.